Welcome to the Developing a High-Quality IEP module series. The modules within this series are designed to help you create a well-written and meaningful IEP based on your students' individual needs. This is Module 3, the IEP Team Meeting. In this module, we will discuss required IEP team members, understanding and communicating team member roles, the excusal process for IEP team members, how to support student participation, and setting up the IEP team meeting. Materials you will need for this module are the notes page for the IEP team meeting module, the current Idaho Special Education Manual, and the sample IEP meeting notes page. You may also consider accessing the Student's Guide to the IEP document, sample IEP meeting agendas, and the Parent Guide, Questions to Ask in an IEP Meeting. Before we get started, please pause the training video and discuss who are the required IEP team members. Let's take a look at IEP team members and their roles. You can find this information in a table in the Idaho Special Education Manual, Chapter 5, Part 1, Section D. So, who are the team members that need to be part of the IEP team meeting? The parent or adult student must be part of each team meeting. They cannot be excused from the meeting. The district representative. This may be a different individual or role depending on the district and school. This may include the school administrator, special education director, or other individual who is able to make decisions related to resources and ensuring the IEP will be implemented. In some situations, the district representative may also serve another role on the team, such as an individual who can interpret evaluation results. In that case, the individual must be able to fulfill all requirements of both roles and explain their dual roles to other members of the team, including the parent or adult student. The special education teacher or provider is also a required team member. This individual is responsible for implementing the student's IEP. This individual may be a special education teacher, or in the case of a student who receives speech or language therapy only, a speech-language pathologist. A general education teacher is also required. This individual is there not only as a resource and expert on the general education curriculum, but to also help bridge the gap between general and special education. This individual should be knowledgeable of the student and his or her strengths, needs, and goals. If necessary, an individual who can interpret evaluation results and their implications should also be part of the meeting. This person is most often a school psychologist or related service provider. In addition to the team members we just listed, there may be other team members who are required to be part of the IEP team. When it is appropriate, the student should be part of the IEP team. If the IEP will be implemented at the time the student turns 16 years old, the student must be part of the IEP team. It is up to the team to determine what is most appropriate for the student in regards to his or her participation, but he or she should always be invited to the meeting and the invitation should be documented. If the student is of transition age, the team will need to gain consent from the parent or adult student to invite a representative of a transition agency to bridge the gap between school and post-school opportunities. Even if the student does not receive services from the agency, it is important to have that role as part of the team to help identify skills necessary for post-school success. In the case of a student transitioning from birth to 3 services, a Part C coordinator or representative is required to be part of the IEP team. Lastly, any other individual, as requested by the parent or adult student. This may include someone with specific knowledge of the student, such as an educational advocate, family member, medical professional, outside therapist or counselor, or other. There should be a thread between IEP team members and the potential supports and services that the student requires. Some questions you might consider when identifying team members for an individual's IEP include: which roles should be part of the team in order to provide the specially designed instruction the student needs? And which potential services might the team consider, and who might be the person who could provide information about that service? For example, If assessment results might cause the team to consider need for fine or gross motor support, an occupational therapist might be invited to discuss what services may look like for that student. If the student has an area of need related to behavior, an individual with behavior knowledge or expertise might be invited to discuss potential services in that area. Please pause the training video and discuss how you currently communicate roles to members of the IEP team. Now that you've had a chance to discuss how you communicate roles to IEP team members, here are 3 more ideas for helping team members understand how everyone supports the IEP. You may consider sharing tip sheets with team members. These tip sheets may include information regarding the team member's role, what they can do to come prepared to the meeting, what information they might be asked to share, and how they can support other members of the team. You may verbally communicate roles and answer questions prior to the meeting. Something to remember, though, is that we want to make sure to touch base with members of each IEP team and not assume that the last case manager spoke with that person about his or her role. Additionally, it can't hurt to have a refresher and a chance to ask questions. Lastly, it may be helpful to provide the parents with a tip sheet that lists questions to ask during the IEP meeting. We have attached a sample sheet to this module. Go ahead and pause the training video again. This time you'll be completing the heads up game where you will identify IEP team member roles. The individuals who require team member excusal include the general education teacher, special education teacher, district representative, and individual who can interpret evaluation results. Check with your school team or district, but in many cases, the person making the contact with parents may be the case manager. This communication will need to take place prior to the IEP team meeting. Additionally, the team member who will be excused from the meeting will need to provide written input if their area of curriculum or related services may be discussed or modified during the meeting. The Idaho Special Education Manual provides guidance on the written input in Chapter 5, Section 1, Part D, after the table that explains the role of each IEP team member. Remember, an excusal form must be completed before the meeting begins, and the parent or adult student must agree in writing that the team member may be excused. Things to remember. To avoid going beyond timelines, it is best to schedule meetings sooner than later. It's important to remember that parents cannot be excused from an IEP meeting. If your team is struggling to schedule your meeting so that all team members can participate, you might also try scheduling via a virtual meeting such as Zoom, GoToMeeting, or Skype, or setting up a phone conference for team members who cannot be present in person. As part of the excusal process, there should be documentation of the written input provided to the team prior to the meeting, and an excusal form should be used even when a team member is not able to attend the entire meeting. Let's talk a bit more about the IEP team meeting. Teams can prepare parents for providing information at the meeting by touching base before the meeting through a face-to-face discussion, phone call, email, or questionnaire. General education teachers do not always know what they should say at an IEP meeting or what their role is. You can prepare the general education teacher by helping them to understand how they support the team in identifying grade level standards and curriculum the student is working towards, as well as to provide input on how the student is doing in relation to his or her strengths and needs identified in the IEP. Another practice teams might consider is to develop a draft of PLAFs and goals to send home prior to the IEP team meeting. If you have had an opportunity to talk with the parent already, it would be beneficial to include their input in the drafts. Sending the draft home will provide the parent with an opportunity to review the information and come ready to discuss items and make decisions at the meeting. Please pause the training video and discuss how you incorporate students into their IEP meetings. Even if you teach students younger than 16, it is important to consider how they may be able to participate in their own IEP meetings. For students who will turn 16 during the current IEP, Their participation in the IEP's development and meeting are required. For all students, teams might consider identifying specific areas of the IEP that the student can give input on, such as areas of growth over the last year, likes and dislikes, determination of accommodations or supports, or other items as determined by each team. There are tools to use to prepare students, such as the Student's Guide to the IEP, which is an additional document attached to this module. We have probably all had experiences as both part of successful and unsuccessful teams. One way to set our team up for success is by setting team norms. Norms identify expectations or agreements for team members in order to participate in effective and successful meetings. Prior to the meeting, school team members should review and agree on team meeting norms. Some norms you might consider setting include showing respect for all team members, listening and hearing one another's viewpoints, celebrating student accomplishments, presuming that the intentions of others are positive and in the best interest of the student, asking questions to seek understanding, and turning off devices to maximize attention. One way to help the meeting run smoothly and efficiently is to use an agenda. The agenda will provide the team members with information about what will be covered, will help the team stay focused within the designated meeting time, and helps to ensure that all areas of the IEP are covered during the meeting. If a team member brings up a topic that is not part of the meeting agenda, teams might want to consider making a list of those topics to follow up with at a later time. In order to document the discussion and decisions that are made by the team, a note taker should be appointed to record the information discussed at each meeting. Some tips to consider are using team member titles, not names. When team members go back to read the notes, it is important to understand the role of the persons participating rather than the specific names. Use objective language that captures discussion and documents the decisions made during the meeting. And document all parent requests and team member responses, as well as the discussion and team decisions that were made. This documentation will also help when completing the written notice after the meeting. After the IEP meeting, the team will review the meeting notes, which is most often done by reading them out loud to the attendees and verifying that the notes were an accurate representation of the discussion and team decisions. The case manager will then need to complete the written notice based on the decisions that were made by the team within the meeting. Remember to make sure all areas of the written notice are completed. Lastly, if the parents do not leave the meeting with the final IEP document that was developed, agree on a time they will receive that document that includes the written notice in addition to their copy of the IEP meeting notes. As a final activity, pause the training video and watch a video clip of an IEP meeting. Use the sample meeting notes document to record your meeting notes. As you end this training video, please take a moment with your team to consider the following. Discuss one thing you might take back to your team related to communicating team member roles, the excusal process, and/or the IEP team meeting.